Darwinian evolution. Junk science.
Now here's the really horrible part of all this. From a scientific point of view, the scam is Darwinian evolution is not even really science. Claims to be science, it's not science. Now let me tell you a little bit about that. In The Origin of the Species, Charles Darwin himself gave us the measure of his doctrine. He said, why, if species have descended from other species by insensibly fine gradations, do we not everywhere see innumerable transitional forms? Why is not all nature in confusion instead of the species being, as we've seen them, well defined? But as by this theory, innumerable transitional forms must have existed, why do we not find them embedded in countless numbers in the crust of the earth? Why then is not every geological formation and every stratum full of such intermediate links? Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely gradated organic chain. And this perhaps is the most obvious and gravest objection which can be urged against my theory. So basically what he's saying, if natural selection is true, then there are species that are changing into other species all the time by his process. So even in the living world, you should see this going on. You should see some species turning into other species in a very confusing mess. And when you look at the geological strata, you should find intermediate forms of one thing turning into something else. And he says, we don't have any evidence of that. That doesn't exist. And he sees that as a problem. But you know what he thought? He thought as time went by, then we would find that. We would find those transitional species. And that would prove his theory. Well, here we are 150 years later. What's happened? Though billions of fossils have been uncovered in these last 156 years since Darwin's statement, no transitional forms have ever been found. That's kind of a problem for evolution, don't you think? You know what? It's interesting when you look at that. All the species are according to their own kind. Where did I ever read about that? That's the book of Genesis, isn't it? If you think that is still not enough time or not enough fossil beds have been discovered, maybe that's it. Maybe we just have to find more fossils. Well, it says here, consider a discovery by South African paleontologist Robert Broom. He estimated there are 800,000 million skeletons of vertebrate animals in the Karoo Formation. Also, the Gobi Desert of Central Asia is a paradise for fossil finds of dinosaurs, lizards, mammals, etc. It's reported that the freshly exposed skeletons sometimes look more like the recent remains of a carcass than like a supposed 80 million year old fossil. But there is nowhere to be found a missing link or a transitional form. And then this newspaper article says, I think Darwin would now stand by his statement. Wouldn't he be forced to? Wouldn't he be forced by his own statement to say, well, natural selection can't be true because there are no transitional forms? Don't ever expect an evolutionist to say that. They will never admit it because it's more religion to them than it is science. Now, what is a transitional form? A transitional form would be something like a fish having part fins and part feet, sort of in between. Or a bird having part scales and part feathers. Partially one function, partially another, with neither being complete or functional. That would be a transitional form. Even the top experts of evolution theory have admitted that there are no indisputable transitional forms in the fossil record to support evolution across biological groups or kinds, although this news is rarely made public. You'd never know that to look at their little chart, would you? It's all graded for you. This happened to here, then there was a transition to the next life form, and then that happened here. All laid out in a wonderful little chart for you, only that chart does not exist in nature. That's the part they don't tell you. The fossil record contains fossils of only complete and fully formed species. There are no fossils of partially evolved species to indicate that a gradual process of evolution ever occurred. You know where I had to get this? From Pravda. The Russians are telling you things that you can't even find in America. Think about that. In fact, again, from Pravda, all of the fossils with their fancy scientific names that have been used to support human evolution have eventually been found to be either hoaxes, non-human or human, but not both human and non-human. Yet many modern school textbooks continue to use these long disproved fossils as evidence for human evolution. Evolutionists once reconstructed an image of a half ape and half man. They called him the Nebraska man. And they reconstructed him from a single tooth. So they had a tooth and they made up the whole rest of this creature. Actually, it was later discovered that the tooth was from a pig. And let me tell you something. I've done a lot of reading on this. This is not the only time. There is a whole list of these so-called transitional forms, and it always turns out like this because they are so desperate to find a transitional form, and they haven't been able to do it. So if you see such a thing in the newspaper, just wait, and you'll find out, oh, it's really a pig's tooth, it's really a monkey. It's just crazy. As a matter of fact, this Nebraska man was used as a major piece of evidence in the famous Scopes trial in support of Darwin's evolutionary theory. You know, evolutionists are very proud of the Scopes trial because they think that proved evolution over religion, and their evidence was fraudulent. That should tell you something. It's like this. We have two pictures here. A lot of times, people will say, well, evolution is observed in nature. And have you heard them mention the fruit fly? They always mention the fruit fly. You have this picture here. You notice it has the three different fruit flies. And it has 2 points that are called speciation events. But at the end of those events, all you've got is fruit flies. They don't turn into something else. Just different kinds of fruit flies. And this we find in nature. There's a lot of variety in nature. So, like there are different kinds of dogs, there are different kinds of cats. There are different kinds of pretty much everything. That is not unknown to us in nature. What you don't find is the transitional forms. So you can observe these differences within a kind, but what you don't get is this other chart. You have the common ancestor on the bottom. Then somehow from the common ancestor, you've got the insects, then the fish, then the amphibians and the birds and so on, all the way to humans. And the entire thing is a myth. It's all fictitious. They don't have one transitional form of any of that. They can't prove any of that. None of that has been observed. They can't create that through an experiment. So you have an animal transition from one kind of animal into another has never been observed. And we have the definition to be science. It must be based on facts learned through experiments and observation. Therefore, Darwinism is not science because it's not based on observable facts. Therefore, it's a myth.
Was this video informative? Click the like button below to help spread the word to others. Feel free to leave a comment and share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss out on more amazing content from Eliyahu Ben David.